Welcome to our deep dive on systems thinking.
Yeah, excited to be here.
You know, when you sent us your notes on systems thinking, we knew we had to go deep on this with you,
Yeah.
especially since you're looking for practical ways
Right.
to actually apply it.
Absolutely.
So, uh, where do we even begin with this?
Well, first, we probably need to start by defining what a system is,
Okay.
right? Because people throw that word around all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but what does it actually mean?
Yeah.
And I think the real key is that it's not just a collection of things.
Right.
It's a group of interconnected parts
Okay.
that are organized for a purpose.
Okay. So it's not just like a random jumble.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So like a pile of sand is not a system,
Right.
but a sandcastle is,
Okay.
right? Or your body.
Okay.
You know, all the different parts of your body
Right.
are working together to achieve the purpose of keeping you alive.
Yeah. Okay. So my organs and my muscles and my bones, they all have their own jobs,
Exactly.
but they're working together to keep me going.
Exactly. And they're interconnected. You know, your heart pumps blood to your lungs. Your lungs take in oxygen.
Right.
Right. It's all connected.
Right.
Or think about a company.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
you've got different departments, marketing, sales,
Yeah.
product development, all working together to achieve the company's goals.
Okay.
Right. So that's the idea of a system.
All right. So we've got these interconnected parts working towards a goal.
Right.
What makes that different from just a bunch of random things?
Well, it's how those parts interact with each other.
Okay.
Right. So the interconnections are really important.
Okay.
And how those interactions create behavior over time.
Gotcha.
That's what we're really trying to understand with systems thinking.
Okay. So it's not enough to just look at the individual parts.
Right.
We need to understand the relationships
Exactly.
between them.
Exactly.
Now, Donella Meadows, in her book, Thinking in Systems,
Yeah.
talks about stocks and flows.
Right.
Can you explain what those are?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Stocks are the elements that you can see and measure
Right.
at any given point in time.
Okay.
So they're like the things that are there,
Okay.
the nouns of the system, if you will.
Okay.
And the classic example that Meadows uses is a bathtub,
Okay.
right? So the amount of water in the tub at this moment is a stock.
Okay. So the water is the stock.
Yes, exactly.
Got it. So then what's a flow?
A flow is the rate at which things change
Okay.
in a system.
Okay.
So in the bathtub analogy,
Hmm.
the water flowing in from the faucet
Right.
is an inflow.
Okay.
And the water going down the drain is an outflow.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this works.
Yeah.
So the water level,
Right.
the stock, is
Right.
constantly changing
Mm.
based on how much is coming in
Exactly.
and how much is going out.
Exactly.
That it's dynamic.
Dynamic.
Okay.
And this concept of stocks and flows
Mhm.
can be applied to so many different situations. Right. Think about your personal finances.
Okay.
Your bank balance is a stock.
Okay.
Your income is an inflow.
Mhm.
And your expenses are outflows.
Wow, that's a really clear way to visualize that.
Right.
So managing my finances is really about
Yeah.
managing those flows to make sure my stock stays healthy.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Or think about a business managing inventory.
Yeah.
The amount of product they have on hand is a stock.
Okay.
Production is an inflow.
Mm.
Sales are an outflow.
So whether it's a bathtub or a bank account or a business,
Right.
the same principles apply.
Exactly. Systems thinking gives us a framework for understanding this
Okay.
across a wide range of situations.
This is starting to feel really practical.
Yeah.
Now, Meadows also talks about these things called feedback loops.
Yeah.
Can you break down what those are
Sure.
and why they're so important?
Absolutely. So feedback loops are how systems learn and adjust,
Okay.
right? They're the pathways where information about the state of the stock feeds back to influence the flows.
Okay.
Right. So it's like a
Like that.
loop of information.
Gotcha.
And Meadows describes two main types,
Okay.
balancing loops and
Yeah.
reinforcing loops.
All right. So two types.
There's two types. Yeah.
Tell me more.
So a balancing loop works to maintain stability.
Okay.
Right. So think about your body temperature.
Okay.
If you get too hot, your body sweats to cool you down.
Right.
If you get too cold,
Yeah.
you shiver to warm up.
It was like a thermostat
Exactly.
trying to maintain a specific temperature.
Exactly right.
Okay.
The balancing loop brings things back to a stable state.
Got it.
And then we have reinforcing loops.
Reinforcing loop. Okay. What do those do?
So reinforcing loops are the ones that create either runaway growth or collapse.
No.
So they amplify change,
Okay.
right? So imagine a snowball rolling down a hill.
Okay.
As it rolls, it picks up more snow,
Right.
which makes it bigger,
Yes.
which allows it to pick up even more snow.
Yeah, and so on and so on.
And so on.
Okay. I see how that can quickly
Yeah.
get out of control, either in a good way or a bad way.
In a good or a bad way, exactly.
So how do we know if a feedback loop is balancing or reinforcing?
It's all about the direction of the feedback.
Okay.
Right. So a balancing loop has feedback that counteracts change.
Okay.
A reinforcing loop has feedback that amplifies change.
Got it. And I'm guessing these feedback loops
Yeah,
are at play in all sorts of systems?
absolutely. They're everywhere.
Okay.
And understanding them can be incredibly helpful
Okay.
in solving problems or creating desired outcomes.
So this is where things start to get really interesting.
Yeah.
How do we actually apply this knowledge
Right.
about feedback loops to real-world situations?
Right. So let's take an example.
Okay.
Think about procrastination.
Oh,
Something I'm sure we've all experienced at some point.
absolutely.
You might notice that when you have a task that you're avoiding,
Mm-hmm.
the more you avoid it,
Yeah.
the more anxiety you feel. Oh, absolutely.
Right. And that anxiety makes you want to avoid it even more.
And then I feel more anxiety. It's like a vicious cycle.
Exactly. That's a reinforcing feedback loop at play.
Oh, man.
Right. But by understanding that dynamic, you can start to break the cycle.
Okay, so how do we break a reinforcing loop like that?
Well, one strategy is to find a way to weaken the feedback.
Okay.
Right. So in the procrastination example,
Yeah.
you might try breaking the task down
Okay.
into smaller, less intimidating steps.
Okay, so instead of focusing on this huge, daunting task,
Exactly.
I focus on just taking one small action.
Exactly. And by taking that first small step,
Yeah.
you might find that your anxiety decreases,
Right.
which makes it easier to take the next step. And so
Right. So you're kind of like reversing.
you're reversing the reinforcing loop.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's amazing. So by understanding how these feedback loops work,
right.
we can actually start to change our own behavior
Precisely. And this is just one example.
of how systems thinking can be applied to everyday life.
This is so insightful.
Yeah?
It feels like we're starting to see the world
Yeah?
with a new set of eyes.
Right.
But I'm guessing there are also times
Mm-hmm.
when these systems can lead to unintended consequences, right?
Absolutely.
I remember reading about system traps
Right.
in Meadows' book, and that sounded
Yeah.
a little ominous.
Yeah. System traps are a fascinating,
Okay.
albeit sometimes frustrating aspect of systems thinking.
Right. I'm intrigued, but also a little nervous.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of a system trap?
Sure.
I want to make sure I know what to watch out for.
Absolutely. So one common trap is what Meadows calls fixes that fail.
Okay.
This is where a solution is implemented to address a problem,
Right.
but it ends up backfiring
Yeah.
and making the problem worse in the long run.
Okay. I think I have fallen into that trap a few times in my life.
Yeah, we all have.
Tell me more. What does that look like in the real world?
Sure. So think about a company that's trying to boost short-term profits.
Okay.
They might decide to cut costs
Yeah.
by laying off employees.
Seems like a logical move at first glance.
Right. Reduce expenses,
Yeah.
increase profits.
Right.
But what often happens is that the remaining employees become overworked and demoralized.
Yeah.
Productivity drops.
Right.
Customer service suffers.
Yeah.
And ultimately, profits decline even further.
So the fix of laying off employees actually creates a whole new set of problems
Exactly.
that make the original situation even worse.
Right. It's a short-term fix
Yeah.
that creates long-term problems.
And like a boomerang.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this trap can play out
Yeah.
in so many different areas of life.
Okay.
Right? Think about personal relationships.
All right.
Someone might try to fix a conflict
Yeah.
by avoiding difficult conversations.
Ooh, I can see how that would backfire.
Right.
Sweeping things under the rug never really works, does it?
Rarely. Right. In the short term, it might seem like things are calmer,
Right.
but the underlying issues
Yeah.
fester and eventually erupt,
Right.
often with even more intensity.
Yeah. So how do we avoid falling into this fixes that fail trap?
Yeah.
It seems like it can be so tempting to go for those quick, easy solutions.
It is, right. We want to see results quickly,
Right.
but I think the key is to step back
Okay.
and look at the bigger picture.
All right.
Instead of just focusing on the immediate problem,
Okay.
try to understand the underlying system that's
Right.
creating the problem.
Okay. So we need to zoom out and ask ourselves, what's causing this in the first place?
Exactly.
Not just how do we put a Band-Aid on it?
Exactly. And once you understand the system,
Yeah.
you can start to identify solutions
Okay.
that address the root cause.
Okay, so we need to be systems thinkers,
Right.
not just problem solvers.
Exactly.
All right. What other system traps should we be aware of?
Another common one is the tragedy of the commons.
Okay, that sounds familiar.
Yep.
Can you remind me how that one works?
Sure. So the tragedy of the commons highlights how individual self-interest
Mm-hmm.
can lead to the depletion of a shared resource.
Right.
Right. So imagine a group of fishermen
Okay.
sharing a fishing ground.
Okay.
Each fisherman wants to catch as many fish as possible
Right, of course.
to maximize their profits.
Right, makes sense.
But if they all keep fishing at that rate,
Yeah.
they'll eventually deplete the fish population.
Right, and then everyone loses out.
And everyone loses out exactly.
Okay.
It's like that saying,
Yeah.
everyone wants to be the last one to take a drink from the well.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And this pattern plays out in all sorts of real-world scenarios.
Okay, like what?
Overgrazing of pasture land,
Okay.
deforestation,
Mhm.
depletion of water resources,
Yeah.
even overuse of public parks.
Wow, so how do we avoid this tragedy?
Yeah.
It seems like a recipe for disaster if everyone's just acting in their own self-interest.
It can be right. And I think the way out of this trap
Yeah.
is to establish clear rules and regulations
Okay.
that ensure the sustainable use of the shared resource.
Okay, so some kind of collective agreement.
Right, some kind of collective agreement.
Yeah.
This might involve setting quotas,
Right.
establishing protected areas, or creating incentives for responsible behavior.
So it's about finding ways to align individual incentives with the collective good.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, any other system traps we should be on the lookout for?
One more that's particularly relevant to our modern world
Okay.
is shifting the burden to the intervener.
Okay, that sounds a little complex.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Can you unpack that for me?
Sure. So this trap describes what happens
Okay.
when we become reliant on short-term fixes
Okay.
that undermine a system's ability to solve its own problems.
Okay.
Right. So imagine a company
Okay.
that's constantly relying on government subsidies.
Okay, so they're getting a crutch from the government.
Exactly right. In the short term, the subsidies might seem like a solution,
Right.
but over time,
No.
the company becomes dependent on those subsidies
Right.
and loses its incentive to innovate
Yeah.
or become more competitive.
So the intervener, in this case the government, is actually weakening the system, the company, by propping it up.
Precisely.
Oh, wow.
And we see this pattern in all sorts of areas.
Okay, like what?
Overuse of antibiotics,
Right.
leading to antibiotic resistance, reliance on pesticides, creating superbugs,
Right.
even addiction to painkillers,
Oh.
masking underlying health problems.
Oh, those are some pretty stark examples.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid falling into this trap
Yeah.
of becoming dependent on those short-term interventions?
So I think the key here is to focus on building the system's own capacity for resilience,
Sure.
right? This might involve investing in research and development,
Okay.
promoting diversity and adaptability,
Hmm.
or creating feedback loops that encourage learning and self-correction.
So instead of reaching for a quick fix,
Right.
we need to find ways to empower the system to heal itself.
Exactly. It's about moving from a reactive approach to a proactive one.
Okay.
Instead of just trying to fix problems after they arise,
Yeah.
we can design systems
Right.
that are resilient and sustainable.
Yeah. From the outset.
From the outset, exactly.
This is incredibly insightful.
Yeah,
We've talked about systems feedback loops and these tricky traps,
right.
but I'm also curious about those leverage points you mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
Meadows talks about these as places in a system
right.
where a small change can create a big impact.
Exactly.
Can we dive into those now?
Absolutely.
Okay, so leverage points are these areas where we can make a small change but have a big impact.
Right.
Meadows actually outlines a whole hierarchy of leverage points, right?
She does, and it's brilliant
Okay.
because it highlights that not all interventions are created equal.
Okay.
Some leverage points are more powerful than others. And it's all about understanding where to focus our efforts.
Right, I'm ready for systems thinking. 201.
All right, let's do it.
Let's unpack this hierarchy.
Okay.
Where do we start?
So Meadows starts with the least effective leverage points.
Okay.
Things like tweaking parameters
Well,
or trying to optimize individual parts of the system.
So those would be the fine-tuning adjustments.
Right, exactly.
Like adjusting interest rates to control inflation.
Yeah.
Or changing the price of a product to influence demand.
Exactly. Those tweaks can have some impact,
Okay.
but they're often working within the existing structure of the system.
So we're not really changing the game,
Right.
just playing it a little differently.
Exactly.
What would be a more impactful leverage point?
So as we go deeper into the hierarchy,
Okay.
we get to things like changing the structure of information flows.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example?
So imagine a company
Okay.
where decision-making is highly centralized. A few people at the top have all the information
Mm-hmm.
and make all the decisions
Yeah.
that can lead to bottlenecks and slow down the entire organization.
It's like trying to drive a car by only looking through a tiny peephole.
Exactly.
You're missing a lot of what's going on around you.
Exactly. You've got blinders on.
Yeah.
Right? So by changing the information flows,
Okay.
making information more transparent
Okay.
and accessible throughout the organization,
Right.
you can empower people to make better decisions
Yeah.
at all levels.
So it's about democratizing information.
Yeah,
Pushing decision-making power outward.
exactly. Giving people more autonomy.
Yeah, okay. What would be an even more powerful leverage point than that?
So Meadows suggests that changing the rules of the system
Okay, rules.
can be incredibly impactful.
Right, like laws,
It can
regulations, incentives.
Okay, all of that.
We touched on that earlier.
Exactly right. Rules are the boundaries
Yeah,
that shape how a system operates.
right.
So by changing the rules, you can fundamentally alter the system's behavior.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this hierarchy works.
Yeah.
We're moving from tweaking numbers to changing the flow of information.
Right.
It's actually rewriting the rule book.
Exactly.
What's next?
This is where it gets really exciting.
Okay.
Meadows suggests that one of the most powerful leverage points
Okay.
is changing the goals of the system.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Changing the goals.
Yeah.
That sounds like a major shift.
It is, right? The goals define the system's purpose,
Okay.
its ultimate aim.
Right.
So changing the goals changes everything.
Can you give me an example of how changing a goal might transform a system?
Sure. So think about a city
Okay.
that's primarily focused on economic growth.
Okay.
Right? That goal might lead to policies that prioritize development and infrastructure.
Right. Build, build, build.
Exactly.
Sometimes at the expense of the environment.
Right. Or social equity.
Yeah, it's like they're putting all their chips on one number on the roulette wheel.
Exactly right. Now imagine that city shifts its goal to prioritize sustainability.
Okay. Right.
Suddenly, decisions are made through a different lens.
So instead of just asking, will this boost the economy?
Right.
They're also asking, is this environmentally sound?
Exactly.
Does this benefit all members of our community?
Precisely changing the goal
Yeah.
changes the entire framework for decision making.
This is mind-blowing. It's like we're not just tweaking the system anymore.
Right.
We're redesigning it from the ground up.
Exactly.
And there's one more level in Meadows' hierarchy,
Yes, there is.
the most powerful leverage point of all,
The big kahuna.
changing the paradigm.
Yes.
You know, when we first started talking about this,
Yeah.
I was picturing leverage points as these physical levers we could pull
Yeah.
or buttons we could push.
Right.
But changing a paradigm sounds a lot more abstract.
Yeah, it's a bit more intangible.
What does that even mean?
So a paradigm is the set of deeply held beliefs, assumptions, and mental models
Right.
that shape how we see the world. It's the lens through which we understand reality.
So it's not about changing the physical structures of a system.
Right.
It's about changing the way we think about the system in the first place.
Exactly. It's about shifting our perspective.
Okay, can you give me an example of a paradigm shift?
Sure.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
Yeah, so think about the shift from a geocentric view of the universe,
Okay.
where the Earth was thought to be the center,
Right.
to a heliocentric view,
Okay.
where the sun is at the center.
That was a major shift in thinking.
It was a huge shift.
It completely changed our understanding of our place in the cosmos.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
And it opened up a whole new era of scientific discovery.
Totally. Or think about the shift from seeing nature as something to be conquered
Yeah,
to seeing it as something we're interconnected with and dependent on.
exactly right. That's a paradigm shift.
Okay, so paradigm shifts can be really transformative,
They can.
but they also seem incredibly difficult to grin about.
They are. They're not easy.
How do you even begin to shift something as fundamental as a worldview?
Yeah, it's a big question, right?
Yeah.
Paradigms are deeply ingrained,
Mm-hmm.
and people often resist change.
Right, especially when it challenges their fundamental beliefs.
Exactly. But Meadows suggests that one of the most effective ways to shift paradigms
Oh.
is through systems thinking itself.
So by learning to see the world through a systems lens,
Yeah.
by understanding interconnectedness and feedback loops,
Hmm.
we start to question our own assumptions
Exactly.
and open ourselves up to new ways of seeing things.
Precisely. And as those aha moments accumulate,
Yeah,
as we start to see the world in a new light,
right.
our paradigms begin to shift.
Yep.
It's a gradual process,
Oh, yeah.
but it can be incredibly powerful.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
We've gone from understanding the basics
Mhm.
of systems to uncovering hidden traps,
Right?
to exploring these leverage points where we can create real change.
Mm.
What's one key message you hope our listeners will take away from all this?
I think the most important takeaway is that we're not just passive observers in these systems.
All right.
We have the power to understand them, to
Mhm.
influence them,
Yeah,
and to shape the future we want to create.
I love that.
Systems thinking gives us the tools to do that.
It's a message of empowerment.
It is.
We're not just along for the ride.
Right.
We're at the wheel.
We are.
Thank you so much for taking us on this incredible journey
My pleasure.
into the world of systems thinking.
It's been fun.
This is definitely something I'm going to be thinking about
Yeah.
and applying to my own life.
Awesome.
I hope our listeners will too.
Me too. How